Welcome to the Season 2 premiere of Unlocked, a NAMFS podcast. In today's episode, CWCOT Update, Field Impacts Ahead, we take a closer look at the latest changes and what they mean for professionals working across the mortgage field services industry. Let's get started.
Right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 1 of the NAMFS podcast. This season, we're focusing on recent HUD policy changes and their direct impact to the inspection volume, property preservation procedures, and the compliance expectations. But before we dive into those topics, I'd like to take an opportunity for everybody to introduce themselves. So I'll start. Kellie Chambers, I'm President and COO of G7 Service Group. We're a national property preservation and inspection maintenance provider.
Thanks, Kelly. I'm Jodi Gaines. I work very closely with Kellie Chambers at G7, where I'm the CEO and co-founder. And then I'm also CEO and co-founder of Claims Recovery Financial Services. And we are a national claims vendor. We provide government claims, GSE, claims, MI, and loss analysis, and more.
Awesome.
And I'm Eric Miller. I'm the Executive Director of NAMFS, the National Asset Management and Field Services Association, and we're excited to have this conversation. So thank you, Kellie, and thank you, Jodi.
Great. So we're going to start with the most recent communication from HUD, which is Mortgagee Letter 2026-3. It was issued addressing updates to the claims without conveyance of title, which is a very long name, or CWCOT process. So let's start with the history of CWCOT and what the heck it means. So CWCOT has been an option for servicers for many, many years, long before I joined the industry in 2001. It allows servicers to claim refunds for the servicing and property preservation of a property without ever transferring the title to HUD for their REO inventory. Around 2015, HUD started to pilot with the program, started to encourage servicers to start using that option in lieu of conveyance in effort to reduce the amount of REO inventory they had on at that time. It was incredibly successful because the servicer is permitted to auction the property for actually a 20 to 30% haircut on the value of the property instead of the debt owed on the loan. In 2015, the property value was often way less than the debt, and so that contributed to the success of the program. Today, not so much, right? Many property values exceed the homeowner's debt, and that's presenting a whole new set of challenges for servicers recently. And so I invited Jodi here to help us understand those new challenges and the impact to the volumes. So Jodi, let's dig in. You know, from your perspective, what's the most operationally significant change that ML 26-03 offers with relation to the CWCOT program, and why does it matter?
Yeah, so Kelly, great question. So before HUD came out with this letter, they had, issued guidance back in July of 2025 that the industry was not really following what HUD required. So there was a lot of confusion on that, and we've worked our way through that. But what the guidance basically said from July of 25 was, where that CAFMB exceeds total debt, in order to be eligible to file a CWCOT claim, or really almost any claim, the servicers had to bid that CAFMB, which meant when they were going to foreclosure sale where that CAFMB exceeded their total debt, they basically had to come in with a check for the difference between the total debt and the CAFMB, which raised a lot of concerns for the industry, such as, how am I going to get that money back? How long is it going to take? Why do I want to advance money? So the good news is, the industry, we rallied together through numerous trade groups that we work with. And we had lots of meetings with HUD and others. And Mortgagee Letter 2603 is the result of all that feedback that we've given HUD. So what the Mortgagee Letter does is it now gives the servicers options. So they are no longer, I'll say, mandated to have to bid the CAFMB where it exceeds the total debt. However, if they don't bid that CAFMV, simply put, if they don't bid the CAFMV, the claims without conveyance of title claim is not an option, right? So their option is to convey the property to HUD. And the good news is this was not clear. Servicers were worried, if I'm not bidding the CFMB, am I not complying with HUD guidelines? Does this create a whole new risk for me? So again, 2603, it does a really nice job of outlining what the options are. And one of those options is that if your total debt is less than CAFMB and you want to bid total debt, meaning you don't have to advance that extra money, your option now is to convey the property to HUD, and or you can take it straight to REO and avoid your claim altogether. But the good news is there's options, and that's really what the industry wanted.
So I think there's an important correlation here. So I'd like to just roll backwards a little bit. CAFMB, Commissioners Adjusted Fair Market Value. And I think it's important for our membership to understand what that calculation is. If I'm understanding correctly, the HUD determines a price based on the current value of the property and takes a haircut. Why today is the CAFMV more than the debt? And why'd you mention the servicer has to come to the foreclosure sale with a check? Can you help explain that to our membership?
Sure. Well, I mean, the CAFMB today, or most recently for the past number of years, it's all aligned with the market values. And as we all know, the market values have increased, drastically through most parts in the country. We're starting to see those lower in some areas. But because the servicer, I mean, when the CAFMB exceeds their debt, like they've got to go into that property to make sure they're bidding the higher amount. So in order to do that, they've got to come in with that difference between the total debt and the CAFMB. Now, mind you, when they do that, if the property is sold to a third party right at the foreclosure sale, the intent is to drive that amount higher or equal or higher than the CAFMB. So when the property does in fact sell at the foreclosure sale to a third party, the servicer will get refunded that money, right? Because it wasn't necessary and somebody overbid them, which is really the design, right? Like HUD wants to bring in as much money as possible at that sale, because it'll help to address, hopefully, I'll say second liens or, anything else owed on that property. And very importantly, with all the partial claims and the additional, amounts that HUD has given out for those partial claims, the hope is that it'll be enough to recover that and help pay off that additional funds owed HUD as a result of the partial claim. So
yeah, I suspect historically it's been extremely rare that the client would show up to foreclosure sale with a big check in hand, ready to hand over to the county, right?
Well, yes, especially because for years and years and years, we've had guidance and training from HUD that HUD provided that basically said, when your CAFMB exceeds total debt, your total debt becomes your CAFMB.
Right.
And this was part of our feedback to HUD to explain, look, we weren't doing it wrong. We were following your guidance. And HUD obviously, again, came out with their clarification guidance in July of 25 and kind of set the record straight, if you will. But again, this is why it's important to be involved and to advocate for what is right for the industry.
Absolutely. So I'm guessing that servicers don't want to go to foreclosure sale with a lot of money and hand over a lot of money. So how is this process change going to affect actual auction and foreclosure sale activity? And then how does that translate into expected volumes for conveyance?
It's a little early to really know, right? But you've got small and mid-size and even some of the larger banks that are like, we are not going to go to the sale with a check. We're just not going to do that because, one, it's a huge cash layout. And depending if, am I a subservicer? Am I a bank? What's my, so that's very impactful. And then the timing of the reimbursement, right? Like you're advancing that money and it could be in some cases, it could be $100,000. I mean, we've seen them as high as $250,000. And the biggest concern is, what is my cost of funds and how long am I waiting for that money, right? It's not an immediate return. Because of that, we've been hearing that a lot of servicers, they are not going to be bidding the higher CFMV. And therefore, as a result, again, their options are to convey or take it straight to REO. I think, my guess is we're going to see more conveyances. We're already seeing more conveyances, but there's still a lot for us to learn because we just don't know. So, and then of course, as you know, with conveyances, right now we're back to, hey, there's not an automatic 90-day because of your post foreclosure auction. We're back to our 30-day time to convey these properties. So,
that's right.
The clock is ticking.
Yeah. So Eric, I mean, knowing that we're anticipating an increase in conveyances, which I'm hearing similar reports as Jodi is, of course. I mean, what should our field partners and our membership be doing to prepare for one? Now we're going from 90 days to convey to really returning back to that 30-day time frame, in addition to volumes increasing.
Yeah, I think it's the key is really going to be that first time inspection, first time vacancy inspection, making sure you accurately document all the conditions that are out there. Again, that's going to be 100% super critical because that's ultimately kind of the baseline. Making sure the photos justify it, take the extra time, those types of things. Additionally, making sure that as things change, bidding appropriately, understanding what is a conveyance issue, what isn't a conveyance issue. Those are going to be critical. And then again, making sure that when you do provide some data, it's well documented and you're documenting if something changes, why it's changed, what's the condition that's changed to cause it from that initial inspection. So those are really key. We talked about volume increases, as at the MBA conference as well. You heard certain servicer really kind of, spanning the gamut in terms of how they look at these portfolios. I mean, they were talking about, it wasn't going to be a one size fits all. You bid just total debt, or I'll bid, bring money to the table type situation. So, I mean, they're really going to be changing approaches as what they want to do. So I think it's going to be really critical. With added conveyance, obviously adds added timelines. I know once the foreclosure sale happens, that's shortened, but up until that point, it's going to be more grass cuts, more recurring services, those types of things. So it's going to be very, very critical. And then once the foreclosure sale happens, we truly are off to the races, 30 days.
Yeah. Jodi, thanks for the excellent deep dive into 2603. One thing remains consistent with all these HUD policy changes we've been experiencing with the new administration. All the policy changes directly impact the inspection and preservation volumes, right? I do believe there's going to be an impact to the documentation, audits, and the claim recovery outcomes as a result. So Eric's, suggestions of really documenting that first time vacancy, getting those good photos is going to be incredibly critical over the next few months and years to follow, because audits can happen years after we've been to the property, right, Jodi?
Yeah, I mean, I just, I would say to be best prepared because we know that these conveyances are increasing. Make sure your crews are ready, work really hard to get those ICCs done on time. Request your extensions because without those extensions, we know any of the work done beyond the time it should have been conveyed is no longer recoverable and nobody wins there. I would say be forthright with your clients, right? If you don't have good coverage, be a good communicator of that, right? Don't be a hero. We're not looking for someone to take on work that they can't do, because nobody wins. And when the servicer takes losses, they're going to be saying, why did they take this loss? Who's responsible? And if you're being very forthright in your communication, I think one, it increases the trust factor, dependability, reliability, and all that good stuff. And it then allows them the opportunity to say, okay, well, do I have another opportunity? Do I have another vendor perhaps that I could use? And I'll just say, in closing, everyone's footprint is different. So everyone's going to have, a little bit of a different strategy of how they do these things. Am I gonna do a dual path? And we are hearing that dual path conveyance and REO at the same time, right? And I mean, if the property's in ICC first, then we will be conveying those properties, So it's kind of like, I'll say the squeaky wheel gets the grease there, right? But everything is very, very time sensitive as always. And we talked about Kellie in the other podcast, and Eric mentioned it. Documentation. So just make sure you have it. And but it's in many ways it's an exciting time. So we'll see.
Yeah, it is. Man, best advice I think I've heard all week is be forthright in your communication. Don't be a hero. I think we can close on that, because I think open, honest, transparent communication is the best success we could all ask for. So as always, NAMFS, our mission here with these podcasts and with additional training information is to help the industry stay aligned, compliant, and proactive as changes unfold. So thank you for dialing in today and listening to our podcast. I hope to see you all on episode 2.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kellie.
Thanks.
Thank you for watching and listening to Unlocked, a NAMFS podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the NAMFS YouTube channel or follow us wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. We'll be back next Wednesday with another Season 2 conversation, and we look forward to having you join us.